Well, town meeting members take their seats in their respective precincts, and the chairman or acting chairman will take a count. Precinct 1. And you included anybody that's in the periphery, right? Precinct 1 has 12. Precinct 2, Mr. Delinsky. Precinct 2 has 18. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 has 13. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 19. Precinct 5. 5 at 5. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 has 17. 17. Congratulations. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 has 12. Precinct 8. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 has 9. Boy, it must be the same 105. There are 105 town meeting members present, at least when I called the quorum, and that was at 7:52. Yeah, it is now. Will you please rise and join me in saluting the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me be seated. I'll bring up some notes here. This is interesting. The fifth set, this is the sixth, I welcome you all to the sixth session, or all of you, depends on what part of the country you come from. At our last session, we convened at 7:50 p.m. with 105 people present. I know it's not the same 105, but anyhow, there was a sheet handed out with it was either a blue or green sheet with the order of business listed, and much of the requested presentations were completed, and we left off. We completed up to the water department capital outlay purchases. There's now a different color sheet out here. Depends on which way somebody's got, with a current list of what we're doing tonight. And I wouldn't move my list, but anyhow, on that list, I'm not done. All right. Now, just as a reminder, we've taken care of the articles that were voted and advanced to May 19th. Those were, and the change of the sequence in articles, capital outlay, we're completing this evening. We still have Article 2, the big, for reports. Article 11, which is the budget. Articles 13, 14, and 15, which is collective bargaining. Article 23, Armory feasibility study. And I would like to recognize a request that the town accountant has made, that, and we do this usually by tradition. Article 37, which is to deposit money into the general stabilization fund, and Article 38 is a deposit to the building stabilization fund. That usually is a number that is based on the actions of town meeting, and I would suggest that they be after the sometime table until after the completion of all appropriation articles. That's, all those in favor say aye. Okay. All those opposed to moving? Yes.
Mr. Moderator, I have a question. On something as important as that, do you have the ability to make a motion right there, call for a vote correctly right away? Is there no discussion on that?
This is a procedural motion, just as I did at the beginning of the...
Well, repeat it, because I don't think people understood what you just said.
Okay. Articles 37 and 38, at the request of the town accountant, and as we have done traditionally, delayed taking any action on making deposits to the stabilization funds until after we've completed any of the appropriation articles, simply because that is a number that we don't usually have until after we've understood the finances. So that was the request. It's a courtesy request of a department head, and I just want to make it clear that we have moved it. Is there anyone else? Mrs. Frankel.
Can we hear from the Finance Committee on that?
You should.
Generally, we do hear the money's being moved to the stabilization account towards the end. I won't say it's the very end, because we accept reports at the end, Article 2. Only because as we go through town meeting, some balances may change, and so at the end of the meeting, then we take what's left. We did make a recommendation up front to allocate monies to that account, and we thought that that would change as we go through town meeting, but we're okay with doing it at the end.
Just after the completion of appropriation articles. That's just repeating that for the clerk's records.
And the budget.
Well, that's all the other, the budget's way up there at the beginning.
Right. I just wanted to be
Which will be in the end or somewhere. I heard Mr. Coleman, did you make the do I hear a second? Second. All on the motion to delay working on Articles 37 and 38, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'll declare it voted as a voice vote. Now, a second request, and I'm questioning myself whether this is necessary, but that's up to the request is in there. Article 42, in order to not get it confused with a similar article, but it's entirely different, the town planner has requested Article 42, Medical Marijuana Dispensary Overlay District, to be taken sometime after Article 47.
Stretch energy code?
That's article, we have a lot of zoning articles in there. It was just one is an enforcement law and the other is in a zoning bylaw. And it's understandable that if you put these things too close in proximity, we're not addressing the real proper issues.
Point of information, Mr. Moderator. Article 47 is a stretch energy code.
Yes, that's right. After that, they would like to do Article 42.
But between 42 and 47 are 4 or 5 articles.
That's correct.
I guess I'm missing the understanding why we would need to do this.
Only because it is so close to Article 40. They just don't want to do it on the same night.
Oh, so you're saying Article 40 and 42 would be confused by doing them together?
Right, on the same evening. I mean, I think people can, personally, I think everybody can read pretty well and understand.
So, too.
And the question is, I mean, this is totally up to the body whether that's a necessary move or should be honored or not honored. Right, just to take this sometime after we've gone through other zoning articles.
I don't think I heard a motion for that, Mr. Moderator.
On the motion, I heard it, is to take Article 42, Medical Marijuana Dispensary Overlay District, and delay it till after we've done Article 47. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'm declaring the motion lost.
It did.
Just a short recap of the other night.
It's only 3 articles.
We dispensed with all of the CPC articles and the most of the zoning, Articles 51, and then the water capital outlay. And we adjourned at 10:26. Is there any other comments we need from the chairman of the board, or anybody else that has to make comments relating to this evening? Mr. Hill, do you have any comments, or did you say?
Thank you, no, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. Anybody else that's... What? I think my... Yeah, but this thing, we did do something else between that. We're having a little, what was the difference between whose clock we're looking at? Okay. On the first article this evening is Article 29, which is a motion for the sewer capital. Mr. Hill.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make a motion to dismiss Article 29A, Queen Anne and Beaver Brook Stations.
Mr. Morton.
Mr. Moderator, I move to divide the question in the interest of saving a huge amount of time. You will call Article 29A if this motion approves, and we will probably dismiss it. You will call B if this motion is approved. It is a transfer, it requires only majority vote, it will probably be approved right away. You will call C, which is inflow. It's a borrowing article. We have to vote on them separately anyway, and it may have some discussion, it may not. It takes a 2/3 vote. And then you will call Article 29D, which is a transfer and requires only a majority vote. Since we're going to go through this anyway, let's start at the top, go through one at a time, and so I'm moving to divide the question.
All those in favor of dividing the question, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Mr. Morton. We voted to divide the question, take an individual vote, just as the recommendations are on A, B, C, and D.
That's right,
No,
to
that's
dismiss
the next
28,
step.
29A.
Well, actually, it's a question that Mr. Morton raised, is the way the procedure is doing, and he's done the correct thing so that we could make Mr. Hill's motion.
Mr. Moderator, we're just going to vote on each one individually. We'll read it and vote on it. Is that not what we did for 28? No, I'm going to read it and vote it, each one.
On 28A, Mr. Hill.
I've already made a motion to dismiss 29A.
All those in favor of dismissing 29A, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion is carried unanimous.
Article 29B.
Okay. Majority vote is dismissed. Let me just make a note of that. 807. 29B.
To appropriate $15,000 to pay for half of the cost of the Chevy Tahoe for the sewer department, and that to meet this appropriation, $15,000 be transferred from the sewer fund retained earnings.
This is just Mr. DeFelice. You want to speak on it?
Mr. Moderator, just a quick question. There was a meeting a week or so ago on the stretch energy code, and part of it talked about the types of vehicles the town can buy under that code, and through you to whoever's doing the stretch energy code, does the Tahoe meet that? It sounds, from what we were told at that meeting, that it would have to be a smaller vehicle. And I think the only exception, as I recall at that meeting, was for police vehicles. So I just want to get an answer to that.
There's some,
That's not true. I went,
okay.
well, that's not what they told us at the
Well,
hearing. So-
both of you guys are out of order now. So you did, Mr. Coleman.
And this is why we get nothing done.
I was there at the meeting for the stretch energy code, and I believe, yes, they have if this is approved, town vehicles will have to have a certain mileage miles per gallon. Exceptions are police cars, fire cars, and trucks, and I believe public works. They certainly can't have a dump truck or garbage trash truck have a set mileage. Do you?
Mrs. Frankel. Can you answer some of that?
This is incredible.
I can answer it only in the sense that we are on this article right now. We have not gotten to the stretch energy code. If and when we do, it will take effect after the fact that we are voting on this article. I don't know any dump truck in the world, any sander, any plower, whatever, that's going to get 20 miles to the gallon. If you think that there's one out there, suggest it right now so that we can get going.
Mr. Anzavino.
John Anzavino, Precinct 4. Just to clarify it, first of all, there are vehicles that are excluded when you do the green communities, which is a vehicle policy. This is a stretch energy code, which has to do with building. You're mixing up your meetings, Ed. This particular article is on a vehicle, and it has nothing to do with the stretch energy code.
Mr. Billow? Okay, no, okay. It's whether we buy the other half of the truck that we bought the other day, so. So whether we put the engine in or something, I don't know. Any further discussion on the? Since I've heard no further discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. On the motion to appropriate $15,000 to pay for one half of the cost of a Chevrolet Tahoe for the sewer department, and to meet this appropriation, $15,000 be transferred from the sewer fund retained earnings. If there's, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries unanimous. That's good. We're making it. Article 29C, Mr. Hill.
To appropriate $300,000 to continue improvements of the sewer system to reduce infiltration and inflow, otherwise known as I&I, and that to meet this appropriation, $55.89 be transferred from Article 38 of the annual town meeting of May 1st, 1999, Department 6204, $19,232.74 be transferred from Article 7 of the special town meeting September 2009, Department 5894, $184,711.37 be transferred from sewer fund retained earnings, and that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $96,000 under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 1.
Mr. Gator, you want to speak?
Dennis Gator, Precinct 3. Very quickly, did anybody check to see if there was zero interest money? I see it's listed here, but did we get an answer?
I didn't hear all of that. What was,
Through you, Mr. Moderator, as of right now, I don't have anything for zero interest, but we're on top of that.
Mr. Murphy, you,
So in this here, we're going to, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Finance Committee. So we're going to allow $300,000. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, sir.
Well, disappointed because your math isn't correct. If you look at the 415, if you total that up,
$300,000 plus $100,000 plus $15,000.
so in the other column, you got,
The original $500,000, we spoke with the Department of Public Works Superintendent, and he thought $300,000 would be enough for next year.
okay, thank you.
any further discussion? As this is a borrowing article, it will require a 2/3 vote if it's not unanimous. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous. You're going pretty good here. 29D, Mr. Hill.
To appropriate $100,000 to purchase a John Deere backhoe with accessories for the sewer department, and that to meet this appropriation, $100,000 be transferred from sewer fund retained earnings.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Soros?
Joe Soares, Precinct 2. How many backhoes do we have?
Mr. Batchelder?
As of right now, counting all of them, which includes a track excavator, we have 3.
And we obviously need another one?
This one is to replace a 1987. We spend more time fixing than we do working with it.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, on the motion itself, which is to appropriate $100,000 to purchase a John Deere backhoe with accessories for the sewer department, and to meet this appropriation, $100,000 be transferred from sewer fund retained earnings. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. Hill, I have some questions about some of these together. And basically, I just want to know, has the, did you agree, are you agreeing to whatever these motions were? or not? We just, okay. Okay. Then I'm going to let you put them on. Article 52, Mr. Hill. I will remind them that everybody that I believe last week there was a set of these motions distributed by the school committee 5 pages or 4 pages. It said article and then the motion. And they all fit on one page, so. Mr. Hill, will you read the essentials?
As printed in the warrant?
Well, I like to see the dollar amount.
Sorry about that.
That's the most essential part.
Right. No, I'll read the motion. That the town appropriate the amount of $450,000 for the purpose of paying costs for the replacement of existing window and door assemblies at the Helen H. Hansen Elementary School, 1800 Central Ave, Stoughton, Massachusetts, 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Said amount to be expended under the direction of the school's facility committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 14, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and if the MSBA's Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, any project costs the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, provided that any appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote from the town to exempt the amounts required for the payment of interest and principal on said borrowing from limitations on taxes imposed by Mass General Law 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, and that if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of the borrowing authorization pursuant to this vote shall reduce by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA.
Is there any discussion? I'll allow Ms. Rizzi to do the first part.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the boards, members of town meeting. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Mr. Moderator, may I please speak, make comments on 52, 55, and 56 at the same time, since they have certain things in common?
I make a motion to discuss them together and vote on them separately.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries.
The reason that I'm asking that, the school district is only bringing forward 5 articles this year, and they all have one specific purpose, which is major repairs to a number of our school buildings. The facilities committee, appointed by the school committee, has been looking at the buildings. It was a joint committee for a number of years, and after the facilities master plan came out, then the schools began looking at that portion of the master plan, and certain buildings, as we looked out over the years, we're going to need major repairs in order to last the lifespan that we believe that we need them to. The reason I would like to speak about 52, 55, and 56 together is all 3 of these articles are for projects that you have already approved. They are underway, and these articles are for additional money for these projects that are already underway, because as we have partnered with the Mass School Building Authority on these projects, they are requiring that we bring to the table at least the potential to borrow more money because there's a certain cost of doing business with them. However, the reimbursement rate, which is over 50%, makes it worth it to invest this extra money, because it's still going to be cheaper to complete these projects with them than it would be without them. And the reason that 52 is the Hansen windows, and 55 and 56 are the west roof and the Dahl windows, and these are the ones that are already underway. The other 2 articles are for projects not yet begun, and that's why I've asked to speak about them separately.
Oh, okay. Fine. Just what were those numbers again that you wanted, because I didn't record that.
52, 55, and 56 are all ongoing projects, the Hansen windows, the west roof, and the Daw School windows. They're all ongoing projects for which the MSBA is asking us to borrow additional money because of the cost of doing business with them. When we work with them, we are required to have an owner's project manager, and we are required to work with a design firm of their selection. And that increases the cost of the projects a little bit, but their reimbursement still makes it worthwhile because they each will come in at around $200,000 less than they would if we were to do them on our own, even with the additional borrowing.
Mr. DeFelice.
Through you to the superintendent. The last sentence in the, excuse me, in the Finance Committee's comments says here that the Stoughton schools indicate they are routinely under projections by 20%. I find that pretty disturbing. Could you explain why, when you're setting up information to come to this town meeting, that you are routinely 20% short of what the numbers should be?
I don't believe, Mr. DeFelice, Mr. Moderator, if I may through you, I
Yes.
don't believe that was the intent of their comment. I think what they're saying is that, as a rule, we have a history of bringing projects in at about 20% less. So in general, we bring projects in under budget. When that happens, it means that money gets to go back, or there's money that we don't borrow.
Okay. Just a quick one through to the chairman of the Finance Committee. Is that the correct interpretation?
Mr. Hill.
Yes, Mr. DeFelice.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ms. Bronston.
Denise Bronston, Precinct 8. I have a problem with this MSBA and their process. Nothing against the school or anything, but I just want to point out and give you some food for thought. I see red flag number 1 requires the town hire only their architects and project managers. Red flag number 2 is that the town has to commit, to execute legal documents, legal contracts with the MSBA's project manager and architect. After that, then MSBA will consider whether or not to give the town a grant. It's not an automatic that we're going to get any percentage of funding from the state, and it's been noted before that MSBA likes to do business with this town of Stoughton because this town of Stoughton has very strong financials. Now, if you look at the stormwater project, we had applied for a federal grant for that, and it was denied because they said the town has enough money to pay for it. I would recommend putting one item out to MSBA and see if they actually come up with the funding, the grants, or whether they're going to tell us after we're on this legal hook that no, we have too much money for them to give us a grant. That's all. Thank you.
May I, Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker?
Ms. Rizzi.
The Mass School Building Authority isn't federal, and there are lots of different grants that come into the town and to the school district from different sources. The MSBA is an authority that's funded by a small percentage of the sales tax, and that's the money they have to work with, and then they distribute it across projects that they consider to be the most needy. They have already agreed to partner with us on these 3 projects, and the reason that they select architects and owner project managers ahead of time, and we get assigned one, is they're all firms that have been vetted, that they believe are going to bring the project in under budget. They actually do this to make sure that they contain the costs, both theirs and ours, because they consider our money precious and their money precious. So these are safeguards to make sure that the project is not overspent. So this is not a question of will we or won't we. They have already committed to work with us on these 3 projects.
Mr. Moderator, through you
Ms.
to
Bronson.
the next speaker. The first architect that the town was required to use was so bad, he had no experience. This is the architect that the state told us that we had to use. that he had never had any previous experience on doing windows or roofs. So I understand how you might think that they're being vetted for us, but I spoke with Mr. Harding, and if he would like to get up and speak to the issue. He knows of an excellent architect that MSBA forbade the town to use and to go with their architect. I just want to point out that you can't just jump into this. You have to analyze what's going on with the state. You know, I was looking up some legal cases, and one of a judge in one of the cases where a Democratic senator was convicted of bribery, and Judge Woodcock Locke said that bribery in this state, political corruption in this state.
Let's keep right on just the merits of this.
Okay, sorry. But anyway, just please consider it and think it through first.
Mr. Moderator, if I may just make one response to the previous speaker. There was an architect assigned to us that we believed we were not getting the best possible prices. So we met with the MSBA team, and we told them that we would like to replace the architect. They worked with us to do that. So now we're already seeing cost savings from the other firm. And the people that they work with are some people that we have worked with in the past, but they come up on the list in order. So we don't get to pick the particular firm that we want, but they helped us take another firm from the list, and we're much more satisfied now that we're getting better pricing.
Mr. Morton.
John Morton, Precinct 3. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I have a question. I think the superintendent said that the first three, which total about $4.3 million, have already received the approval of the funding source in the state.
If I may, Mr. Moderator, through you to Mr. Morton. The three articles, 52, 55, and 56, already were projects that were approved by this town meeting, and these articles are additional funding for them. 53 and 54 are proposed new projects for the Gibbons School.
And as to those, we do not yet have an affirmative participation agreement with the state.
I'm going to ask Mr. Harding if they have agreed already to the Gibbons projects.
Mr. Harding.
The Gibbons are new projects, and they have not yet agreed to work with us on those.
I see.
Those are not yet begun.
So the level of participation is around 40%, do you say?
It's about 53%.
53%. I have a question about the wording at the very end. It says, provided that any appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amount required for payment of interest and principal from the limitation on taxes. That is interesting to me because it deals with both interest and principals, and it sounds it's more than an interest override. It's a interest and principal override. Does that require a ballot vote by the town?
No, sir, it does not.
So this is not an override?
No, sir. We have already begun, so that we estimated the cost, the potential cost of the Hanson windows, the Dahl windows, and the West roof last year, and the town meeting voted over the last 2 years for those projects. So they are already underway. But in the context of working with the MSBA, they're saying that they think that they'll just cost some more. So this is just to borrow additional money so that we make sure that we have enough to cover the cost of the entire project with their involvement.
But I guess I'm not understanding this. If we vote in favor of this, does that constitute an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts required for payment of interest on said borrowing from the limitations of taxes?
I know that there hasn't been an issue about this before, and that the articles that were voted last year and the previous year have been funded through borrowing and are underway. And I think we would need a lawyer to explain why they have that particular language. But we are permitted to borrow the money or raise it in any of the, however.
Was that language in the borrowing of last year?
Yes, we take the language of the motions directly from the MSBA. When we send a statement of interest, at the end of the statement of interest, they give us the wording that they would like to see voted. So we don't write the wording, we take the wording that they have given us and vetted.
So that is the same language that was in the votes that we passed last year?
And Mr. Harding has reminded me that bond counsel vets all these articles before we bring them before you, and they have done so.
And I guess, just to be clear, what this means is that if it is, this total borrowing is not exempted from the limitations on taxes, but anything in excess of this is, am I correct?
We would not be borrowing anything in excess of this amount, and we anticipate that we will actually be borrowing less than this amount. We have estimated on the high end so that it would not be necessary to come back yet again.
What is the process and what is the timing on an approval by the state to participate in these additional articles?
They are already participating in these projects. We have begun the Hanson windows, the Daw windows, and the West Roof projects with the money that was appropriated in previous town meetings.
Yes, but are they participating in the additional funding that we're talking about here in these articles?
It is their requirement that we borrow for the entire amount of the project, and then they will reimburse us. So they don't allow us to just borrow the amount that we're going to end up paying. And I don't know the etymology of that process.
Okay, thank you. I support the article because we have to prolong the lives of these schools. Otherwise, we'll be building new schools when they collapse. And I think, you know, it's like your house. If you need a new roof, you put a new roof on your house. And if you don't, you'll be paying for it later when you have to replace the interior walls and ceilings. So I would urge support of these articles.
Mr. Fitzgerald. Or Mr. Lurie.
David Lurie, Precinct 6, and through you, Mr. Moderator, I just have a simple question. If we have already funded this project from last year, and we're already halfway into the project, exactly where are we? Are there windows that are already taken out and installed with new? Are there materials sitting by waiting to be installed, and there's no money left for the project to install materials that are there? It's kind of a multifaceted question, but I'm trying to lead to an understanding of what would happen if we voted no. We funded this last year. We didn't expect it to have any more needs. What would happen to the project at that point? So where are we now, and what would happen if the project could not go forward with more money?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the
Ms.
previous
Rizzi.
speaker. I will say first that it is not customary for us, and it has never been my practice, to come back and ask for money for something that has already been approved or started. So there was a certain, it's not my preference to do that. The roofs and windows that the district has done without the MSBA when there was no program, and for a number of years there was no program, so everything was funded just with Stoughton's money. This MSBA program is new, so we didn't realize that we were going to have to incorporate the cost of doing business with them. So I'm just saying, it's not what we normally do. We usually ask for a certain amount of money. We do the project, we do it well, we do it for less than we ask, and that's the end of it. And that's my preferred practice. We're still in the design phase, so we're working with the designers for the windows. We've done testing for some hazardous material. The owner's project manager is involved getting the project planned so that it can be underway, but we have not gotten through the formal bidding yet to actually begin the building. So preliminary work has been done, but there are no new windows or a new roof yet in any building. We're at the very early stages.
All right,
So there's no materials bought with last year's money, and it was all used for the planning and preparation of the project?
Correct.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dick Fitzgerald, Precinct 3. Previous speakers have, my fellow Precinct 3 member, these projects are very, very important to the town. In 2010, we stood here and presented the facilities master plan to you. We told you what the cost would be on the school side and the cost on the town side. Dr. Rizzi, Mr. Harding, and the School Facilities Committee, which I'm a member of, have done a lot of work putting this together. And you have to think of the cost. These are repairs that must be done. They have to be done. They were told by a consultant that these are things that need to be done to the building. You can only imagine what the cost would be to the taxpayers of this town to do this without the partnership with the MSBA. And as previous speaker has stated, the MSBA does come in and tell you how you're going to do it, who you're going to use, and they actually help us determine who we are going to use in consulting and designing and engineering. These are very important projects. It would be a great cost to the town, and any time I think this community can receive upwards to 54% return, I don't think we should turn this away. A previous speaker had stated that about articles and about returning monies or whatever to the town. I go back to the facilities master plan. We came before you and you approved up to $200,000 to be spent for that study. And our committee spent $138,500 and returned $61,500 back to the town. Not that you borrowed it, we give it back to you, we just didn't spend it. But that's what they do, and they work very, very well. And having worked with them for a great number of years, I think they've saved the town a lot of money. I ask that you support all of these articles. The previous speaker that questioned the articles for the Gibbon School, those will be in line and follow the same process with the MSBA. There's correspondence or conversation already going on with the school department to accomplish that. So I'm very confident that will happen. But I strongly urge you to support these. This is part of what this master plan told you had to be done. The numbers were huge. They are huge overall for the whole project. But these are our buildings, and they need to be repaired. So I ask you to please support these. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. Good evening, Dr. Vizzi.
Good evening, Mr. Ventresco.
I have a question. I'm a little confused here. Last year, we approved $750,000 to do these windows at the Hampton School. And now this year, you're asking for another $717,000.
It's $450. That was reduced.
Oh, it was? Oh, well, all right. So I missed that. Okay. So it's going to be over $1 million then, or around $1 million to do these windows. All right. The only problem I have with the MSBA is there was an article in the Enterprise about a month ago. Some town in Norwell, one of them towns over there, had a big project. And the bidder was way under what the cost was supposed to be. So I would have liked to know what the second or third bidder was, because maybe the first bidder was somebody new and he didn't know how to play this game. Because according to that article, the MSBA overestimates the cost of these school projects. And by doing that, that's telling the contractors, giving them an okay to bid higher prices. So you're really not getting, you're getting the windows, you're getting reimbursement by them, but at a higher finished cost. I'm not saying not to put the windows in. You need the windows, but I'm not too crazy about the way the MSBA is doing it. Thank you.
If I may just comment on one thing, Mr. Moderator, through you. The $450,000 is more than we anticipate. We don't believe we're going to need that much, and so I don't believe that we're actually going to have to borrow all of it.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. I too support these capital expenditure articles on behalf of the schools, and I'm happy to do so. However, I have a concern that was brought up by the gentleman from Precinct 3 about the language that the appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts required for the payment of interest and principal on said borrowing from the limitations on taxes imposed by Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, and in parentheses referring to Proposition 2.5. And I guess I don't want to put town council on the spot, but if he's not, because, I mean, frankly, as I said, I support the articles, but I'm inclined, unless I get a satisfactory explanation, I wasn't real convinced by the earlier answer that this doesn't in fact require a vote of the town, which that's exactly what it says, an affirmative vote of the town to exempt these amounts from the Prop 2.5 limitations. And I just want to make sure we understand fully what we are approving if we were to approve these. I want these to be approved, but I want to make sure we know what we're doing. And if Attorney Fair is prepared to address this question tonight, I'll be happy to hear what he has to say, but otherwise I'm inclined to table these until next week until we get an answer to this question. To me, the clear language says an affirmative vote of the town, which would mean a ballot question. I don't recall this language. I would stand corrected if I'm mistaken. I don't recall this language in last year's, but regardless, whether it was in there or not, to me, this sounds like and says a vote of the town to exempt the amounts from the Prop 2.5 limits. So I'm not sure if Attorney Fair wants to address this question or not.
Mr. Fair.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Moderator. The motion as written is referring to what is essentially known as a debt exclusion. So it would require a ballot vote of the town. It's contingent, so the appropriation is contingent on a successful passage of that. And the debt exclusion, if passed, would then take the amount of that debt outside of the normal levy limit for the life of that.
Okay. All right, thank you. So if I could just restate what Attorney Fair said, we both have to vote for this here at town meeting, which again I'm happy to do, but also then these articles would then have to go on the ballot for a debt exclusion to be voted on town-wide, correct? Subsequent to this vote.
Mr. Fair.
Oh, okay, so if the grant amount were to cover the entire cost, if I may, through you, Mr. Moderator, if I'm hearing you correctly, if the grant amount covered the entire cost, there would be no debt exclusion question required. But if the grant amount did not cover the entire cost, there would have to be a ballot question to exclude the additional amount. Is that correct?
Right. If there's no appropriation from the town, in order to expend the monies under this article, there would need to be a ballot vote that's made subject to the ballot vote. That's what this motion is written is indicating. Okay. It's contingent on a ballot vote under 5921C.
Okay, and thank you. And I think through you, Mr. Moderator, I heard the superintendent earlier indicate that the reimbursement rates run about 53%. Is that correct? So presumably the town's portion of that, if my math is correct, would be approximately 47%, which that amount would then have to go on to the ballot.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'm quite sure that is actually not the case, because the articles, these are These are extensions of things that have already been approved. It is necessary for town meeting to vote to borrow the money as town meeting votes to borrow money for everything that you choose to borrow money for. And they require that we borrow the full amount, but we will never use this full amount. So there will never be more expenditure than this because we will be getting back the 54%. And they reimburse as the project is ongoing. So when the project is finished, then we'll have been reimbursed for it. We don't have to wait for the entire length of time that the money's borrowed, nor does there need to be additional funding after this.
All right, thank you. I guess the bottom line would not necessarily, or the answer to the question about the ballot question would not necessarily sway my support of the article, but I do think it sounds like if I'm understanding Attorney Fair's explanation correctly, this is going to have to, assuming we approve it, and there is going to be an expenditure on the part of town unless it's 100% reimbursable, then it will then have to go on the ballot as a debt exclusion question, which, again, my whole point is just to make sure everybody is aware of that. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, might I allow Mr. Harding to address this issue as he deals with more technical issues than I do?
Mr. Harding.
This is wording directly from the MSBA. This is wording that we've used several times in the past. This is the same wording we voted on last year with just changes in the amounts.
See, through you, Mr. Martin, there seems to be some disagreement as to whether or not this is the same wording. As I said, I'm not trying to slow down. That's fine, Bob. Thank you. I'm not trying to slow down or dissuade anyone from supporting these. I support these articles. I just want to make sure we know exactly what we are going to be required to do. Okay. Thank you. Right. It's been suggested that this language was not in last year's articles. And I didn't recall it being in last year's articles either, but again, that's why the language is a bit disconcerting, to say the least.
Mrs. McNeil.
Pat McNeil, Precinct 8. Through you, Mr. Moderator. I have a lot simpler question than Mr. Crimmins did. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding what was already started, and if that was also under the MSBA, and this is just additional money that they are requiring, and that we're being reimbursed for that money as well that you've already started. I'm just a little unclear. That the projects that you've already started, they were done under the MSBA as well, correct?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, we are already working with the MSBA on the Hanson windows, the Dahl windows, and the west roof.
So what was approved last year was also being reimbursed?
That is correct.
And that this is just that they are suggesting that we're going to need more money because of the cost of doing business, and it's just part of that same project?
It's part of the same project.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Perry.
Good evening, folks. John Perry, Precinct 3. Quick question. I'm looking at the capital outlay projects here for the elementary schools. We have 5 elementary schools in town. My constituents care quite a bit about the South School. And I notice here that it's been 5 or 6 years for me on town meeting floor, and I haven't seen one capital outlay for the South School, and feel in a lot of ways that it's kicked to the curb. I mean, if we look at the age of the school, the West School was opened in 1951, the Hanson School, 1962. I know we have large plans for the South School. Every year, it's talked about that we're not putting money into this school because we don't want to put money into the school that we're going to tear down. So I'm just hoping at some point there's a bigger picture. There's not going to be a 5-year or a 6-year plan to get that school built, possibly longer, yet our kids in the South School sit with a roof that leaks, windows that you can't see out of, and yet I see a ton of money being spent on these other schools. Again, 6 years, folks, not one improvement over the South School that we've been putting town meeting floor. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, if I can respond to the previous speaker. When the facilities master plan was completed, it gave us a sense of the repair versus replacement costs of all the buildings and a sense of which ones were in the worst condition, and they staged over 5 years, which is actually going to take longer than 5 years, what repairs on all the major systems should happen when. And so the Facilities Committee has picked the buildings to put major money into that we are likely to keep for the longest period of time. The South School is not on that list. The expectation is the South School will be the first elementary school replaced in the town of Stoughton. That does not mean that money isn't being spent on it or that it isn't being cared for or maintained. But the money that is being spent on the South School comes from our operations and maintenance budget, and we have not had to ask for money as we don't for the regular maintenance of our school. So it's not as though it's being allowed to go to rack and ruin, and certainly it's being maintained at a safe and acceptable standard. We just have not needed to borrow money for that purpose.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. I'm a bit confused. We haven't done a debt exclusion in this town, at least that I can remember. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Mr.
TJ.
Recupero.
Hey. To you, please. I've said I was confused about, I don't understand this debt exclusion completely, well, at all. And if the town as a whole votes for this, does that mean our taxes would be more than the 2.5%? So our taxes would be higher if we voted for this. Is that correct? Or no? Yes? What do you think?
Well, I'll refer this to the town manager, who's whispering the answer to me.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay.
I think the gist of what you said is that
Well,
if in fact the town were to adopt a debt override, it would have to be done by a ballot. The Board of Selectmen would have to set a special town election.
Yes.
It would be held at all the precincts as usual.
Yes.
And if it were passed, then that portion of the tax bill would be exempt from 2.5.
That's the difference.
So the question was, would our taxes be higher if the Board of Selectmen had our taxes up to the 2.5% increase, and this were to pass, would our taxes therefore be higher?
All things being equal, yes.
All right, now to the Board of Selectmen, and I know you really can't answer this, would you consider this and set the tax rate that much lower so we wouldn't pay any extra taxes?
I can't speak for the entire board.
Mr. Recupero.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, through you. I can't speak for the entire board on that. I say for myself, I don't think that's a very good idea.
So then, if the town votes for this on the ballot, our taxes would be higher. I don't see that happening. Now, we can vote for this, but I don't know that the town would go for it. Thank you.
Mr. Rock.
Hi, John Rock, Precinct 3. Quick question about the language. To the superintendent of schools. This language about Prop 2.5, is that standard in any kind of agreement for any towns that partner with the MSPCA? What is it?
The MSBA.
Okay, yeah, that one.
This is the language that they put in the proposed motion. It is not, I believe, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but Mr. Murphy has given me last year's warrant book, which he handily carries around. We took the language last year from the MSBA SOI, so if it's been changed, it's because they changed it. But when the Finance Committee looked at these articles, they were looking at it as this borrowing be incorporated as the other borrowing, and that it would be serviced as the regular debt service is.
If this is standard with all these agreements with other towns, are they all voting on debt exclusions? I don't think so. I think this is just standard language.
I don't believe so.
I mean, maybe the town council would know about that, but I can't believe that this borrowing is going to require a vote of the town. It doesn't make any sense to me. I totally support this. If we don't go in on the agreement with the, whatever it is, MBA, we're going to lose a considerable amount of money. It's good. The project is going to cost the town a lot more money. So I think that's the bottom line. And I don't think there's going to be any town vote required, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a civilian.
Dr. Camacho.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I also have a copy of the wording from last year, and the wording from last year on the articles did not contain the sentence about 2.5, because I think my ears would have been up considerably, like the Easter Bunny. When the articles came to the Finance Committee, my recollection is that this wording about 2.5 was not in the information that came to the Finance Committee. So the hearing that was held, the public hearing that was held, did not contain this wording about anything about a debt exclusion for the monies if they were borrowed, etc. So I support the building projects for the schools. I do not support the fact that we are being forced by the Massachusetts School Building Authority to adopt language that the town may not need to use and also may be forced to use so they can use more expensive people to do their work. I'm not sure in the long run if this is the least expensive way to go. But nevertheless, what was heard publicly at the public hearing did not have anything about a 2.5 debt exclusion in that language. So if I had known that, I would not have voted in favor of that or asked that it be clarified for us. So my suggestion would be, as a previous speaker mentioned tonight, is that we table these articles until we can get a full explanation of this in writing as to why why the language was changed and what the school committee knew about this language before it was put into this motion. We need an explanation of this, so I would like to make a motion to table these articles until we do get this information.
That is a motion to...
Thank you very much.
That is a motion to table.
No, all of them have the same language, so we have to take care of all 5 of them at the same time. The motion was made previously to look at 3 of them on the superintendent's request. So I would make the motion, if it's in order, Mr. Moderator, that we table not only the 3 that we were asked to consider together at the superintendent's request, but we also table the other 2.
On a motion to table, now, do you want to have this to a time certain, or?
No, you always tell us it should not go to a time certain because we don't know when they can get the information. And we have to get that information when, so we can read it before the articles come on the floor. So why don't you help me out, Mr. Moderator, with when you think is a good time?
That's a bad opinion. When is a good time? Well, we're gonna
Probably when you come back in June, right?
well, that might give some of these scholastic-minded people to really read what we got ourselves into. Maybe
Mr.
suggesting the 16th? Mr. Hill?
Just a quick informational point of view. With the holiday, bond counsel might not be available, so we want to take that into consideration while you table this. We certainly would want their opinions again.
If I might just add one point of discussion
Dr. Rizzi.
before the vote. I haven't really explained this incredibly well. This language is here in case the town were to ever take any number of articles or debt and do a debt exclusion. This particular article could not be included unless this language was in here. It will never be necessary to do that because the money is available to borrow for this article, so it's not going to be an issue. We would be happy to strike the language because of that. It's not ever going to be necessary to do a debt exclusion. Having said that, if you still want to table it, then I wouldn't have any objection and would just talk about it later.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker and to the town meeting representatives, I don't see that we have the option because we've been told that we cannot, the language has to be there. So I don't understand how the previous speaker can say that they would be willing to drop that sentence. I think we need a legal clarification on this, and then I would be very happy to vote in favor of all of these articles, provided we understand exactly what we're getting ourselves into here with this one sentence. So that's why I ask for a tabling of all 5 of these articles.
Just to remind you, we did a sort of...
To the
supplemental back.
16th, Mr. Moderator, please.
The 16th?
Yes, please.
6/16. Is there any problem with that date or deadline? I understand we have to have something done by that time.
When's our deadline?
Is that what you said?
So May 28th is our deadline?
Just to clarify, so that people understand.
16th.
May 28th, our deadline.
The MSBA has piece that is in there that's causing the issue is this bracket piece, which is optional. If you want to borrow to be contingent on 2.5.
Okay.
But it's not required. Mr. Moderator, through you, this is just to clarify something. The MSBA puts out on its website some model articles and motions. Within the motions, and in my understanding, this is where the school committee and school superintendent received or I guess adopted this language. Within their model motion, though, there is a bracketed portion that allows or gives the town the option of making a borrowing subject to a 2.5 override or debt exclusion. It's not required that that motion contain that if in fact the town is not looking to have it be subject to a debt exclusion. So it could be stricken if that's the, if the town is comfortable and has the financial room within the levy limit, et cetera, to borrow these funds within 2.5.
Technically, there's no debate on a motion to table, but if we don't understand what we're doing. On the motion to table to the 16th session, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. All those in favor, please rise. The chairman will take account.
I'd rather hear it. I'd rather hear it. I agree with that.
Just strike it?
Yeah, just change the language. I think he's right. It's bracketed language, and that's what I'm looking for right now.
Precinct 1. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 is 5. Precinct 2. 9. Precinct 2 is 9. Precinct 3. 4. Precinct 3 is 4. Precinct 4. 6. Precinct 4 is 6. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 3. Precinct 6. 9. Precinct 6 is 9. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 3. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 7. All those opposed, please rise. Nine for 1. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 8. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 11. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 13. These are all no's. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 4. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 8. Precinct 7. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 2. Okay, it is, all right, I got things, I've got my numbers in the wrong place. 46 and what? The motion does not carry. 46 yes, 63 no. So the motion is still on the floor. Motion to table was lost.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Urel.
I make a motion to strike the bracket, so-called bracketed part of the language as stated by Mr. Fair, and proceed with the discussion.
We have one, that's the only thing that's, we have one. After the Prop 2.
So,
I would say.
if I may, Mr. Moderator, read the proposed strike. Would be the section at the bottom of the motion saying, provided that any appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts required for the payment of interest and principal on said borrowing from the limitations of taxes imposed by MGL 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5.
Where did that start? I'm looking for the first bracket. Where, wait a minute. My glasses aren't that good. Okay. Wait a minute, are we looking at the same piece of paper? Let me see this. Okay. All right, just to repeat, just so that everybody's clear, and this is now being a motion made by the petitioner, and it is striking.
This would just be for Article 52, because we're voting them separately.
That's correct. This is just for Article 52. So as we go along and put these on the floor, they can be done on the floor. This is on Article 52, and there should have been a opening bracket on your motion, and I'm going to start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th line from the bottom, it says after town, semicolon. Get your pencils out. And all that, we'd run a line through it, which goes all the way down that says Prop 2.5 in parens and then close brackets, semicolon. And if that is exactly what you agree to, as that's the motion, Mr. Urel as chairman of the school committee, then I will consider that in the record. I'm going to write on my piece of paper too. Mr. Feaster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Joseph Feaster, Precinct 4. We had an original motion that was on the floor before the motion to table was for 3 articles to be considered. I believe it was 52, 50, 55, and 56.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker. I had asked that we be able to discuss them at the same time because all of the issues are the same, not that they be voted on as a group.
I understand that, but again, if we're going to talk about striking the language as consistent, I just wanted to ask through to you, Mr. Moderator, can we be voting on the striking of that language since it pertains to those 3 items that were open for discussion, or do you want it for each one?
The town clerk reminded me, since we are doing these one at a time, we'll address them when we address it at each time, because right now the motion is just on the floor is to deal with Article 52.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
So we're still on the, I didn't take your time away on the procedural thing. Mr. Feaster, did you want to speak on anything else on this? Okay. Anybody else? Ms. Walsh?
If I ask a point of clarification, can I still move the question?
No, because
Then Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2, I will move the question as amended.
The motion is to cut off debate. Now, what I'm going to do, just so that it's in the recorded record, that I'm going to make sure that everybody knows where we didn't vote. Doesn't make any sense, but anyhow. And I'm going to try to summarize this for the record, is that the town appropriate the amount of $450,000 for the purpose of paying costs of the replacement of existing windows and door assemblies at the Helen H. Hansen Elementary School, 1800 Central Street, Stoughton, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto. In parens, the project, close parens, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, parens and quotations, MSBA, end quote, end close, paren, comma, said amount to be expended under the direction of the school facility committee. I can hear everything is going over there, and it's Ms. Campbell. I don't like to read this more than once. Thank you, and you probably don't either. Under the school facility committee, to meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and if the MSBA's Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project, any project costs the town incurs in the excess of the grant may be approved by and received from the BA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, semicolon. Then, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has been taken out, and then it says, and that, if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA. That is the motion. I'm going to hold on to this so I can correct my... Yes.
Did we vote on the amendment, and did we vote to close debate?
First of all, yes, you voted to close debate. On the amendment itself, I accepted this because it came from the petitioner of record. Is they're actually just striking this out of the motion. It doesn't require a vote if it's a... The petitioner was the school committee, Joyce Husini, representing the... No, she was doing that on behalf of the school department. It did originally... Yes. However, this is a school committee article. It is, the motion was drafted but through the school department, and therefore, even though it was, that is the beneficiary of the article, so I'm accepting that it be removed, and if you don't like it that way, well, you've already indicated that you don't want to do anything more with it. Again, as this is a borrowing article, we have to have a standing count. I have a little room on my piece of paper here. I wrote big. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take a count.
Everybody.
14 for one. Precinct 2. 17. Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3. 16. Precinct 3 is 16. Precinct 4. Precinct 4. 19. Precinct 4 is 19. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 17. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 12. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise and the chairman take a count. Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2.
0 with 1 abstention.
Precinct 3. All right, 15 and 1. Okay, precinct, that was, oh, I missed my, what was precinct 2 on the, it was 17, okay. Yeah, right. Okay, now, precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0 on the nose. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 0. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1.
That's the templated language from the MSBA. You can see where it's in brackets.
Okay.
Well, look at the page before. It's an email from Joyce. I asked her for it.
The motion carries 122 yes, 110 yes. Oh, that's all right. If you can read my piece of paper when I get through, it'll be something. And 2 noes and 1 abstention. Actually, there should be 2 abstentions. I had.
So, Mr. Moderator, just to review, it's 122 yes, 2 no, and 2 abstentions?
No, it's 110 yes. 2 noes. I had 2 people that had abstentions here.
Where did the 122 come from? Okay.
So we had 1 abstention, okay. The motion, 110 yes, 2 no, 1 abstention, and that is now at 9:24. And it's not tabled. We will go into Article 53. The whole thing, we didn't, when we get to those things that they want to strike out, that's why the clerk suggested that we deal with that thing. We're going in the order, and we're on Article 53 now. Mr. Hill?
And Mr. Moderator, I'll just read our motion without the language, is that correct?
If that language is in this, I don't know whether it is.
I've gone through every one and highlighted it.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Urel.
I would like to make a motion to strike that portion and the remainder of the article, if that's permissible.
Let's do it one at a time.
So I would do so.
Just because we're only dealing one article at a time. Just make the motion without that stricken in. And when you come to that part, Mr. Hill, I will mark my copies too. Okay.
I guess the first motion is to strike the language that begins on line 16 that says, provided that any appropriation, and ends on line 20 with Proposition 2.5 bracketed.
All right. Let me find it. Okay. Provided and 2.5. Okay. Make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, Mr. Hill.
That the town appropriate the amount of $2,590,000 for the purpose of paying costs for the replacement of the existing roof system and associated components at the Joseph H. Gibbons Elementary School, 235 Morton Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental to or related thereto the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of the School Facility Committee. To meet the appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and if the MSBA's Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project or any project costs the town incurs, in excess of any grant that may be approved and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town. Skipping down. And that if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA.
On the motion, I see Mr. Ventresco. Unless there's a, Ms. Rizzi first is representing the school department.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If I may just speak very briefly on these two articles, 53 and 54. These are not yet projects that have been accepted by the MSBA. We are expecting to hear in July. We submitted these new SOIs for the Gibbons window and roof systems, and we resubmitted the SOI for the replacement or major renovation of the South School, and we expect to hear sometime in July if they will partner with us on these. If the MSBA does not invite us to partner on these projects, then we will submit them again, but we will not do them ourselves.
Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. I'm a little confused here. On the, Dr. Rizzi earlier said on the past article that the MSBA said they had to insert that article for, if we approve the money, it had to go to an override. Then we had the...
Mr. Ventresco, let me correct you. You may not have heard with all the mumble jumble here. That the town council
Yeah, I'm going to address that in a minute.
why that part was stricken. We don't have to put it in there.
Well, that's when I'm confused. First, when the attorney from the left over there and the town attorney have a little debate here on the legality of everything, town council's decision was if you approve this money, it had to go to an override. Then 15 minutes later, more discussions, he comes out and reverses his first decision, says you can strike it out. So he gave us two decisions, yes and no. So which is it? Maybe we should wait and get an official ruling from the MSBA.
I think Mr. Fair can repeat and try to clarify it a little more.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. For you, the question that I was asked earlier by Mr. Crimmins was whether or not the motion in its original form would require a 2.5 override, a ballot vote for the debt exclusion. And my response was, as it was presently written, yes, it would require that. The question later was asked, or there was a discussion about whether or not that contingent language about the 2.5 debt exclusion was required by the MSBA. And the answer to that question is no, it is not required by the MSBA. It is an option for the town. It does not have to be in there. So if the language is not in there, there is no need for a ballot vote.
Any further discussion? Mr. Murphy. On the motion to cut off debate, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries to cut off debate. On the motion, I'm just going to be very short on this. It's just to appropriate $2,590,000 for the purpose of paying for the cost of existing roof system and associated components of the Joseph H. Gibbon Elementary School according to the description in the printed motion with the deletion. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman will take account. Precinct 1 is 14. Precinct 2. Mr. Dolinsky. How many you got? 17. Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 15. Precinct 4. 18. Precinct 4 is 18. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. 16. Precinct 6 is 16. Precinct 7. 11. Precinct 7 is 11. It's very difficult for me to hear people in the back. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 8. All those opposed, please rise and Chairman take a count. 011, Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 0. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 6 is 0. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1. One abstention, including 17, right? Correct. Okay. They had 1 no. Okay, what do you got? Okay. The the total of all precincts. Precinct, yes, 106, no, 2, and 2 abstentions. 1 abstention. All right. 2 noes, 1 abstention. Okay. If we aren't all batty after this. So the motion is carried. It is voted in favor. It's definitely a 2/3 vote. We will go to Article 54. Mr. Hill.
Article 54. I make a motion to strike the language beginning on line 15 with the words "provided that any appropriation" and ending on line 4 lines later on line 19, ending in the words "proposition 2.5" bracket.
Can I copy that?
Yeah, the original motion is being read as without that language.
Right.
It's not a motion to amend, because there's not
No,
a motion
right.
on the floor yet, so I
Right.
just want to make sure people
Yep,
understand.
that's it. I want to make sure everybody has their records correct. And this is not a motion to amend. It is being stricken out, just as a reminder, so it's, we're taking now for the entire motion, Mr. Hill, just so that. You don't have to vote on the striking out because he's reading it reading the motion without it. So that's the new motion without that line.
That the town appropriate the amount of $1,330,000 for the purposes of paying costs of the replacement of existing window and door assemblies at the Joseph H. Gibbons Elementary School, 235 Morton Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, and said amount to be expended under the direction of the School Facility Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA. And if the MSBA's Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project, any project cost the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, skipping down 4 lines. And that if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA.
Dr. Rizzi first. Yeah.
This is the second article being proposed for major repairs on the Gibbon School, this one for the window and door assembly. Again, this is an SOI that has been submitted to the MSBA. If they don't agree to partner with us, then we would not go forward and build it on our own.
Mr. Murphy? You don't really have to move the question if nobody has come up to speak. There being no one wishing to speak further, and I'm not going to read it over again so that we have something to do, and if it's unanimous, I won't ask you to stand. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay. All those in favor, please rise and the chairman take account. If you'd like to have it in the record, it's certainly proper. How many? 14 from Precinct 1. Precinct 2. 17. Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3. 15. Precinct 3 is 15. Precinct 4. 19. Precinct 4 is 19. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. 16. How many? 16? 16. Precinct 6 is 16. Precinct 7. 8. Precinct 7 is 8. Precinct 8. 9. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise and the chairman take account. 0 at 1. Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2.
0, 1 abstention, sir.
0, 1. Precinct 3. 1. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. 0. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. 0. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 0. Precinct 6 is 0. Precinct 7. 0. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. 1. Precinct 8 is 1. Guys come up and the numbers agree? All those in favor was 105, 2 noes. Again, the motion is more than a majority and one abstain. That's the count. We'll now go on to Article 55. And again, I take it we want to have that stuff stricken out.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to strike the language starting on line 15 in Article 55 and ending 4 lines later on line 19, ending with the language Proposition 2.5 end bracket.
Okay.
Now for the motion, that the town appropriate the amount of $450,000 for the purposes of paying the costs of the replacement of existing window and door assemblies at the Joseph R. Dorr Junior Elementary School, 131 Pine Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of the School Facilities Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need, as determined by the MSBA. And if the MSBA's Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project, any project cost the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, skipping down 4 lines, and that if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of the borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA.
Any discussion? Dr. Rizzi?
Mr. Moderator, thank you for your generous offer to let me speak on this, but I think I shall decline.
Okay. Mr. O'Regan, do you wish to speak? You're sitting in. Oh, all right. There being no further discussion, if this is not unanimous, I will take a standing count. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. We'll take the count for the record. All those in favor, I hope, are standing. Precinct 1 is 14, Precinct 2.
17.
Precinct 2 is 17, Precinct 3. 15. Precinct 3 is 15, Precinct 4. 19. Precinct 4 is 19, Precinct 5. 7. Precinct 5 is 7, Precinct 6. 16. Precinct 6 is 16, Precinct 7. 8. Precinct 7 is 8, Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Chairman, take a count.
0.
Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2.
0, 1 abstention.
0 and 1. Precinct 3. 1. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. 0. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 0. 6 is 0. Precinct 7. 0. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. 1. Precinct 8 is 1. She got 2 and 1 abstention. The total is 105 yes, 2 no, and 1 abstention. The motion carries. Getting there. Maybe. Article 56.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make a motion to strike the language beginning on line 15, going 4 more lines down and ending in the words Proposition 2.5 end bracket. Continuing on with the motion, that the town appropriate the amount of $600,000 for the purpose of paying costs of the replacement of the existing roof system and associated components at the West Elementary School, 1322 Central Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, 02072, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA. Said amount to be expended under the direction of the Schools Facility Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and if the MSBA Board of Directors votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on this proposed repair project, any project costs the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, skipping down 4 lines. And that if invited to collaborate with the MSBA on the proposed repair project, the amount of the borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town and the MSBA.
Is there any discussion? Ms. Rizzi?
Mr. Moderator, I believe we covered this article as well in our initial conversation about the 3 when we bundled them together.
No further questions? On the motion, again, since you're going to insist, all those in favor, please rise and say. All those in favor, please rise, and the precinct chairman will take a count. I don't want, precinct 1, 14, precinct 2. 17. Precinct 2 is 17, precinct 3. How many? 15. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 19. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 16. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 8. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
0, sorry.
Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2.
0, 1 abstention.
7, 0, and 1. Precinct 3. 1. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 0. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1. Okay. 105 yes, 2 no, 1 abstention. It is approved. It's now 9:49. Go by mine. Yeah. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
This time, we're getting into some procedural articles. Article number 30. Mr. Hill.
It's on page 92 in your book and, of course, in the handout of motions. Article 30, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept and enter into contracts for the expenditure of any funds allocated or to be allocated by the Commonwealth for construction, reconstruction, and improvements of town roads, or to take any other action relative thereto.
Is any discussion? If no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, I'll declare it unanimous. We go into Article 31. Mr. Hill.
To authorize the Board of Selectmen to apply for and accept any federal and/or state funding which may be available to the town or take any other action relative thereto.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. It's approved. And it is still only 9:50. Okay. Now, we've done Articles 32 and 33, so we're now into Article 34. which has reference, it's on page 97 of your book, on reference material on 2005. And I believe the Finance Committee has a motion for that.
That the town vote to appropriate $100,000 to pay for the cost of participating in the Massachusetts Attorney General's Abandoned Housing Initiative, and that to meet this appropriation, $100,000 be transferred from free cash.
Is there any presentation on that? Mr. O'Regan.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Bob O'Regan, Precinct 1, Board of Selectmen. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard many comments throughout town meeting this year and town meetings past about deterioration in our community that is affecting the quality of life in the town, the way the town looks, the aesthetics, things like that. All of us, as we go through the community, I believe, are able to identify housing that is empty, that is not being maintained, that represents a public nuisance, that represents a challenge for public safety officials who might be called in to deal with a fire or vagrancy. It affects how the town looks. It takes away from the housing stock. We have issues on what we can do with those kinds of properties in the community because we have not yet put together tools that are available for us to deal with those problems. One of the tools is the Abandoned Housing Initiative that is operated through the Office of the Attorney General. You'll see in your book at page 206 an explanation of how the Abandoned Housing Initiative works through the Office of the Attorney General. In short, what the Attorney General's office has done is put together a program to assist communities like Stoughton, where there is housing that is abandoned but still habitable, that can be made habitable to be brought back for all of the right reasons. It's someplace people can live. It reduces or eliminates a blighted property or properties from the town. It improves the tax rolls. Think of all of the things. Think of all of the reasons why when you drive by an abandoned housing site, you want that fixed. This gives us a tool to do it. And it gives us a tool to do it before it gets too late. By that I mean it's a property that is so run down and derelict it can't be made habitable again. Its taxes are not being paid on it because no one wants to maintain it. And I believe there are things going on with abandoned housing that are trying to, frankly, influence the town to change zoning or make other decisions because the pitch, and having served on the Board of Appeals, Zoning Board of Appeals for a few years, the pitch is often, well, let me do what I want to do because what I want to do is better than what you have now, which is property that the property owner hasn't maintained. This process works so that through the Attorney General's office, a receiver is appointed. A receiver is a court-appointed officer to take charge of the property and make it habitable. And that only happens after the Attorney General's office has notified the property owner of the opportunity to get in and fix it or do something with the property, and the property owner has decided against doing it. When and if our money is used to bring the property back, we have a lien against the property in the hands of the receiver. That is, there's a lien in favor of the town of Stoughton. Think of it similar to a tax lien, And the property owner has to pay the money back. If the property owner doesn't pay the property back, the receiver can cause the property to be sold and we get our money back. So we get to have property rehabbed, we get housing restored, we get the look of the town brought back. All good. You ask, well, isn't this against the interests of the property owner? Doesn't the property owner have the right to let his property or her property go to ruin? And I submit it's part of this body's choice to say, as a matter of policy within the town, no. that if you own property in the town of Stoughton, you have some responsibility to the rest of it, to the rest of us. And this is a way to encourage that. In practice, when I've spoken with the Attorney General's office on how this program works, in practice, their experience is when the Attorney General's office calls the property owner and says, your property has been identified as abandoned, and it's being moved into the Abandoned Housing Initiative, the property owner gets involved and gets it fixed up, which is what we want to have happen. So this is a good thing. If your belief is that there are parts of this town, if there are properties in this town that are being abandoned and neglected to the detriment of the community, and frankly, the safety of children who might find it fun to play in them, vagrants who might choose to live there, public safety people who might be called in to put out a fire or get people out, this is a way to address that in my opinion, does no harm and only good. And if the result of a phone call by the Attorney General's office to the property owner is for the property owner to sell it to another property owner so it can be fixed, that's fine. So that's what this is about, is one of the kinds of steps we can take as a community to begin addressing what we all think is a course to reverse, and that is the deterioration of properties in the town. So I urge you to approve this. The amount of money is anticipated for us to be able to participate meaningfully in this program. The money will come back to the town from the property, so this will net cost us nothing, but the benefit, there is no cost, so the benefit far outweighs any cost that you might think there would be. Thank you very much.
Mr. DeFelice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, it looks like Big Brother's at it again. Why do we have to keep screwing with our neighbors? Why can't we just let people live they want to live? As Rodney Dangerfield said, not Rodney Dangerfield, Rodney King, I'm sorry. Get my Rodneys mixed up. Getting old. Why can't we just all get along? There's no reason to be worrying about how our neighbors are living. We heard earlier from the school people that there's something like 20% of the town are below the poverty line. Well, do you think that perhaps some of these so-called spots that are out there, perhaps there are people that are living in these houses that can't afford to do the things that's being proposed by the proponent? You know, there's no saying beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm sure people that may be living in some of these so-called rundown houses aren't doing it by choice. They may be elderly, they may be handicapped. There could be any number of reasons why this may happen. There was one thing in here about the height of a lawn. I guess if it was over 12 inches or so, that's a problem, I guess. The other day I was going down Route 139, and I was passing the Masonic Hall, and the grass was pretty high. I went by today, it was cut. So I don't know whether you give notice to people that you must have this done within a certain period of time. Also, I'm wondering, it says that we have to spend $100,000 to become, is this like dues that's required by the Attorney General? I've never seen an article that said, you know, we have to pay to become part of this article. So I'm wondering, is the $100,000 like a initiation dues or something? And please don't use all my time in the answer. Okay, that's a good answer.
Mr. O'Regan.
Mr.
Okay,
Moderator, I'm
I'll
sorry.
go on. Oh, you want to answer?
The $100,000 is what we believe will be a reasonable amount to have available for the restoration of these properties that will come back. So this is not money that we will spend on rehabbing property that we won't see. This is money that will come back from the lien. And to address one point that I think is a bit of confusion, the title of this is the Abandoned Housing Initiative. So concern that this might affect people who are living there is misplaced, because you can't live someplace that you have abandoned, otherwise it just doesn't connect. So this only applies to, let me use the word, derelict, unoccupied housing units that still can be made habitable.
So who's going to play God for the town of Stoughton making these decisions?
Well, that would be with the inspectional services to determine whether the property is abandoned.
Who's the professional service?
Inspectional services, so it would be the code enforcement officer and the building inspector. It may well be, let's use a real-life example. It may well be, ladies and gentlemen, that one of you has a home in your neighborhood that you drive by and you see kids playing in all the time and you know nobody lives there, so you call the police. And the police go and find all the windows are broken. There may have been fires, in the fireplace, but there's nobody there, so there's concern about what would happen. They call the building department. The building department comes in and makes a determination that it is abandoned.
Okay, thank you. Have any of you out there as a child played in an abandoned house? No? Probably some have. I remember growing up, there was an abandoned house on what's called Mill Street, and we used to play there and so forth. So, what's your point?
First of all, I'm the one who asked in
He's the one
response to a point of
you have to
order.
talk to.
And do not interrupt the speaker. I will.
Another example would be, a lot of folks probably here have at some point in time built a new home. And sometimes it's years before everything is done on the home, including the grounds, maybe porches, whatever it might be. So, why do we have to keep doing this? Why can't we just let people do their own thing? And if they can afford to have, a grandiose house and a lot of landscaping which we could provide, fine. But I don't think we should be extending ourselves over these other folks. Thank you so much.
Mr. Tony Souza. Mr. Scardino, if you want to go first.
Joe Scardino, Precinct 1. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the proponent of this article. I want to understand, Mr. O'Regan, how this works. If the overseer or organization at the Attorney General declares a property abandoned, then at that point the town expends money in order to repair the properties?
The steps would be that the town would notify the Attorney General, who would attempt to locate the property owner and convince the property owner to address the property, to fix the property. If that did not work, then the Attorney General would file for a receiver in the courts, either the Superior Court or the Housing Court. A receiver is a court-appointed officer similar to a guardian or an executor, it's a position like that, who takes charge of the property with an obligation to make it habitable again. This fund would be used to allow the property to be made habitable. The receiver would have to, I believe, get permission to expend the money before the receiver could do it. For example, a receiver couldn't decide to put in a marble bathtub, and then when the work was done, a lien in favor of the community would be established on the property, which the receiver would be charged to collect back to restore the money to the fund, either through the owner or by sale of the property.
When does the town advance the money for the repairs?
When the work is done.
Okay, so we get to the point the funds are advanced, and then we have a lien.
Then we have a lien.
Is our lien junior or senior to the mortgage to the bank?
I believe it's junior to the bank.
But don't most people abandon their property because it's underwater? They can't get the amount of money necessary to sell the property?
Maybe, but the property will have been rehabbed, so it will have restored to market value, and one would expect that one of the questions to be looked at on whether to engage this would be if by rehabbing the property, the lien amount would be recovered. I do not believe it's conceivable that if a property after being restored is underwater, that any of the tax money could be devoted to it. It's going to have to be able to repay the lien, or the lien will not, or the money won't be spent. That's part of determining whether the property can be restored to become habitable.
But that's kind of a iffy, because if the receiver says, I think it will get $100,000 more for it, and at the property's auction, we don't get the money, it means that the town is out that money. Am I correct?
Possibly,
Thank you.
but unlikely, because I cannot imagine that any Board of Selectmen would authorize the money to be expended on such an iffy proposition. I don't know any of us who would do that.
Mr. Souza.
Antonio Souza, Precinct 3. A couple of my questions already been answered. The only one I have is, will we have to pay prevailing wages to have this house rehab?
I don't know the answer, but this is not a government, this would not be a municipal contract. A receiver is not somebody employed by the town. A receiver is not an agent of the town. A receiver is an independent, court-appointed person accountable to the judge.
Thank you. I do support the article.
Mr. Mullen.
Excuse me, Bob Mullen, Precinct 2. My question is, when it goes to court and they appoint a receiver, is the owner of the property entitled to be there too?
Absolutely.
Okay, so he or she does get due process at that
Notice,
point.
before this process can begin, and one of the aspects of this that I think is beneficial for the town is that the Attorney General investigates and finds out who the owner is and gives notice to the owner, which, by the way, takes some of the load off the town if we have an absentee property owner, which may be part of the problem. And because it will be a court action, a summons to the property owner will have to be issued and served before a receiver can be appointed.
Okay. The only other concern, I think that's good for due process. At least the person who owns the property has some points along the way.
Has to.
Right. Well, I just want to make sure of that because it wasn't very clear in the diagram in the back of the book. But also, the only other thing that concerns me is when the receiver gets to fix up the house and gets to bill the homeowner, and then if the homeowner cannot or will not pay the cost and the receiver can foreclose on that lien, and the property is sold at auction to the highest bidder, doesn't mean market rate, just means the highest bidder, whoever gets there, and I'm assuming just makes a bid on the house larger than anyone else. So, may or not happen, but I'm just saying, if a house is assessed at $250 and someone just buys it at $150, is that good for the town? Doesn't that lower the prices in that area?
So the way
That's my only concern.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, the way I would approach that is the mission of this is to have abandoned, derelict housing brought back. What do we think the effect is on property values in the neighborhood where that home is, the cost of public safety, the risk to public safety, the risk of public nuisance and something bad happening? I think that, and I think the data would bear this out, that if you have a derelict home, the properties around it, property values, aren't helped at all. And so on top of all of the public consequences, there are consequences to the neighborhood, and frankly, it makes the town less of a good place to live in. So we have to be able to accept some risk, as other articles have presented, that stuff doesn't work perfect. I've been trying to emphasize in some of these articles, perfect is the enemy of better. And so is this solution perfect? No. But is it better than having derelict properties that are abandoned that pose all these problems and risk? I'm bringing this forward because I think it is better. There will be an exercise of judgment by the Board of Selectmen and the town manager and the building department before a nickel is spent, or even the Attorney General is asked to investigate this as to whether, if money is invested, we'll get it back. And I can't imagine that anyone would invest money we don't think would come back by the lien. There's another article that deals with, abandoned, neglected property that can't be brought back, which I won't get into. So we're trying to address, when we talk about maintaining the character or improving the character of the town, this issue that we all know about, which is properties that are not being maintained. And this is just one of the tools. So we no longer have to wait until property sits for 5, 6, or 7 years, taxes aren't paid, and we finally take it on tax title, and we have a rundown property that is really destructive to the neighborhood and the quality of life in the town.
Okay, I mean, I'm not against this article. I'm probably going to vote for it, but do we know the number of the deficient homes in town?
We don't know the number. That inventory, to my knowledge, hasn't been done. We do know, because of our code enforcement officer, that there are a number of deficiencies. We all know by driving around town, I would imagine that all of us could give the building inspector at least 3 properties for that building inspector to look at and see if it would qualify. And if it did, and the properties got repaired, and people were living there, we'd all think that was a good thing. And that's what this is about.
Okay. No, I think, like you said, it's not the best, but it's workable. I'm going to support this article at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Lurie.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Lurie, Precinct 6. I want to thank the petitioner for stating what I believe everybody in the room comes to this meeting for, which is to try to turn around what Stoughton has in terms of its image of being run down, derelict buildings, commercial, residential. We have a lot of things to fix. We have a lot of work to do. Ever since I've been coming, I've noticed 2 kinds of articles that get brought to our membership here. One is either one loaded with lots of legal terminology that is very, very difficult to understand, or we get the other kind that's full of a lot of flowery language that kind of puts a lot of nice kind of framing around it to kind of convince us and kind of touch us emotionally on why we should go forward with something. My concern is that we're losing sight of what I believe in the way I look at what our purpose is to make our town functional with votes around infrastructure, around things that will attract residents that they like the kind of schools that we have, they like the kind of safety that they feel like they're getting from our fine firemen and police force. We should be looking at the things that we control, which is how we are structured in the sewers, the water that we bring in, the school system, the fire, and so forth. What we end up doing is we look at these problems and we say, let's wave a magic wand. We'll put in a bunch of writing into an article that we get to vote on and say, maybe somebody will be able to figure out all this complexity and make this problem go away. Or we could take a path that says, let's put the money into the things that we do have control over, that are very simple to vote on, things that will attract people that have money that want to spend in Stoughton, businesses that want to set up shop here because they want to tap into that market, and let the private industry take care of what they're good at, and let the government take care of what we're good at. There should be a very strong, fine line, and not get a sense of, maybe we can legally take care of this problem. Maybe we can partner up with these businesses to try to bring vital, make it vital again in Stoughton. I'm going to vote against this. I just think that people should be able to get bought out of their property by somebody who says, I'll give you an extra $100,000 because I can't wait to move into Stoughton. That's the way it's done. That's the way it's always been done. It didn't have to take place with a bunch of lawyers coming in and saying, what about that property? I don't know, does it match the checklist that we got? I don't know, we missed this checkbox, let's go check with the committee. Oh, I don't know, that one's gonna have to come to a vote, and we all end up having to vote on property on Plain Street or a property on Route 139 or whatever. I just think it's too much to ask of our town to get involved with these very, very complex methodologies to try to make our town strong, big, good image, all the things that we all came here for. We should be doing what we're good at, which is fix our sewers, fix our schools, fix our fire, and so forth. Those are the things we're good at. Everything else is just too complicated. Thank you.
Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. If the building's empty and it's kind of run down, but the taxes are still being paid on it, so what do you do there?
Mr. O'Regan.
Well, kind of run down is not really...
Well, no windows, no doors.
Well, if it's abandoned and derelict and no windows and no doors, but could be restored and made habitable, it would be, I hate to say this, I don't know why everybody picks on lawyers with checklists, but it would be on a list of candidates for this. That doesn't necessarily mean it would be on this list, because in response to a previous question, Mr. Moderator, you'd look at to see what the cost would be to rehab it, and if the cost and the likely recovery wouldn't be carried by the property, it's very clear that this initiative would not be used for that property. Another article would give us a tool to address that property, that problem. But if the place can't be brought back at a reasonable amount, I cannot see taxpayer money being used to bring it back under this program.
Yeah, but the taxes are being paid on, so you're still going to go after the property?
The issue is whether
Because in
it's...
your eyes, it's abandoned or it's dilapidated?
It's not my eyes. Is it abandoned and to the point in a condition where it is no longer habitable, to make it, restore it to a position of habitability?
All right. I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. Supposing these houses that are dilapidated, but they're on small lots, that if the owner tore it down, then it becomes a non-conforming lot. So now he's got a piece of property that you can't do nothing with it. So maybe some of these places should be looked from the zoning part of it. If the lots in that area are non-conforming, but it fits the criteria there because it's an old neighborhood, then maybe you could tell the owner, tear the house down and we'll keep it as a conforming lot if you ever decide to build it.
Well, if I may respond, Mr. Moderator, sort of connected to this is one of the things that I think we're trying to do with the help of town meeting and building up code enforcement and the building department, planning and economic development, is to give our town government the ability to work with property owners in this situation so that it doesn't get to the point. On this, if it's a small house on a non-conforming lot that the investment of money to bring it back wouldn't be returned, I can't see the money going in. If it's a small house on a small lot, might not take a lot of money, might be a nice starter home for somebody to move into. So it's a judgment call on which property, but it would not be within the scope of this initiative if the property owner didn't cooperate to try to reorganize how that lot fits and make it into a larger house by consolidating lots. That would greatly expand way beyond what this is intended to do.
Well, I think that should be considered. All right, and the other thing is, okay, if I own that particular house, then all I'd have to do is get plywood the doors, plywood the windows, paint them black, paint white curtains, put painted doorknobs like the house on Pine Street and Pleasant Street, then it would be okay, because everything's secure and with curtains, even though they're painted. That would take care of the problem?
Well, abandoned, you've just described a property that's being maintained.
Well, it's not maintained, just to conform with this article.
Even though it's not occupied.
Board up the windows, board up the doors, paint them black, and paint curtains, so it looks like it's livable.
Well, within the scope of this, Mr. Moderator, I don't think the speaker has described an abandoned property. The enemy of better is perfect.
Mr. O'Connor.
How you doing? Joel Connor, District 2. I have a question in terms, if this passes, is the next step to try to take over abandoned businesses in the town? Because, you know, and what is the definition of a business that's abandoned? I mean, for the longest time, I've known these buildings. I've only lived in the town 3 years, but more than 3 years, I've seen some of these same buildings now unoccupied. They may look okay, but it's still an eyesore that you know that for 10 years, this business has been standing here and nothing's going on.
Mr. Moderator, this is just dealing with abandoned housing. The next article deals with abandoned and neglected buildings, which would include commercial. This is not about taking over businesses, but making sure that buildings, in this case, dwellings, are in a condition where people can live. And I'd ask if we can wait till the next article to deal with that question, because the next article is intended to deal with the kind of property I believe you're talking about.
No, and I understand that, but I was just trying to get a sense that I know the difference, but what is the difference if you're able to take, why can you, if we vote this, yes, why can't we include businesses with that? Like what's,
well,
you know, should they be looped together or should they, is there a reason why they're separate? Because abandoned property is abandoned property.
Mr. Moderator, this program that the Attorney General operates is limited to housing. So it wouldn't apply to businesses because it only deals with housing. What other alternatives there are for commercial properties is a different matter beyond the scope of this article.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Frankel. That's the, I have at least three more people who wish to contribute to this discussion. If you do not want to cut off debate, vote no. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I think we got our answer. And your point is well taken. You do? You can make it down there.
I can make it down there, and I could make it all the way over there, but I think it's very disruptive to have people walking in front of the body or whatever here. And I have another problem with it. If you have people who are sitting up in the back of the room who have mobility issues or whatever, how do you expect them to come down there every time that they want to speak, instead of the people that are sitting up here all the time? You always have Precinct 1 over there, Precinct 5 here. What about Precinct 8, who has to sit up way up at the back of the room or whatever? It makes it difficult for them to get up and walk down all the time.
You've had your say, and we have, we might not even have to get that far. The lady that I did recognize before is Mrs. Shannon. Mrs. Shannon.
Hi, Chris Shannon, Precinct 3. I just wanted to bring to bear on this conversation for the town meeting's consideration the broken windows theory, in which if properties are abandoned and obviously not maintained, meaning there's broken windows, excessive litter, graffiti, that it sends a social signal that the community is not willing to monitor and can encourage crime or criminal behaviors as well as safety issues. So I just wanted to raise that for consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Gito.
I was going to say about the same thing. This comes from the Attorney General's office. They're probably not interested in housing as much as they are in crime and issues of that nature. If you turn to page 206, The first line on the initiative says, blighted properties abandoned by their owners in residential areas create safety hazards, attract crime, and lower property values. Seems to me that this is an opportunity to make sure that we don't end up having things like crack houses and other things in town. It just is sort of preventative of doing that kind of thing. And, you know, the town's not, I don't think the town is interested in going out and buying all sorts of property in the town because it's not painted well. Maybe there's something more to this than that. I'm going to vote for this, and I'll bet a whole lot of others of you will do the same. Thank you.
Mrs. Camacho.
Roberta Camacho, Precinct 4. I am in favor of this article. When I read the law, not just the Attorney General summary, it seemed to me from reading the law, unless I misinterpreted, that the receivers are appointed from a list of receivers that are capable of putting forth the money. In other words, they are construction people or developers who appraise what it will take to do the repairs and then have to submit that to the court for approval. And it's their money that actually does the repairing. It was my understanding that we don't put forth the money ourselves as a town. They then have to they go back and they have the owner is then asked if they are going to pay for the repairs, and if they cannot pay for the repairs, the receiver gets something like a $10,000 payment to receive the property and act as a receiver. So all of his costs are accumulated, and if the owner of the property cannot meet that burden, then the property goes to auction and goes to the highest bidder. That's the way I understood the law when I read it. And perhaps Mr. O'Regan is an attorney, I am not, so that was just my simple opinion of what the law was. The broken window syndrome was referred to earlier, and that certainly is true. There are many studies that have been done relative to the broken window syndrome about how it leads to more destruction in a way that we look at our town. But also, interestingly enough, recently there have been done medical studies that actually relate to the condition of people who live, the neighbors who live next to abandoned homes. And they have studied even the blood pressure of those people, and the blood pressure of the people actually has increased X number of millimeters, and their stress level has increased because of the devaluing of their associated neighbor's property. So, bearing all that in mind, I think this is a good program, and I think we should adopt it. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
I made a deal, I'll stick to it. I was going to move the question, but I'm not. And the reason I'm not is because a house I want to point out that's on Central Street, where Central Street and Turnpike Street is. You can see it from the Swan Tavern that we just purchased. In that house, there was attics in there. The house had been abandoned, it was run down. And a guy by the name of Crimmins, I'm not sure what his first name was, has purchased the house from the town. He's doing an excellent job rehabbing that town. He has brought life back to that house. And he's going to make some money on that. But he's also brought life back to the neighborhood. We are now neighbors to that house because we bought the Swan Tavern. I vote in favor of this article.
Ms. Baranski.
I move the question.
To cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed. The motion is to cut off debate carries Since this may be controversial, even though it doesn't require a two-thirds vote, all those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account.
It's free cash, isn't it? Yes. Free cash, it's not free cash.
Right, just in case, just 9 for 1. Precinct 2. 17. Precinct 2 is 17. This is just an appropriation. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 11. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 17. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 10. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 5. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1. 2. Precinct 1 is 2. Precinct 2 is 1. Don't anticipate. Precinct 3. 3. Precinct 3 is 3. Precinct 4. 0. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 1. Precinct 6. 3 and 1 abstention. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1. Precinct 5, yes. You guys agree?
He is, yeah.
The motion carries 84 yes, 11 noes, 1 abstention. It is now the hour of adjourning.
Mr. Moderator, may I thank the body for supporting this article. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, I move we adjourn town meeting until the 28th, Wednesday the 28th at 7 p.m.
The motion is made at 7. If you don't want to come at 7, vote no. All those in favor of adjourning it till 7 o'clock on the 28th, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay. The motion is lost. It did sound no. All right. I need another motion.
Mr. Moderator, move to adjourn till next Wednesday at 7:30 sharp.
On the motion to adjourn, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries.